New York State is the second biggest producer of apples in all of the United States, second only to Washington. In 2017, apples produced $343 million in New York alone. Apples are the most consumed fruit Americans eat, and one of the most prominent crops in the Hudson Valley. In recent years, there has been an increase in hardships due to climate factors. In an attempt to better understand Hudson Valley apple production, I interviewed Russell Bartolotta, owner of Clankill Fruit Farms. He noted that since the turn of the century, there has been drastic changes in farm procedures dealing with an assortment of climate-related impacts. For example, since the turn of the century, he has seen early blooming every season. Early blooms have their benefits and their drawbacks. Early blooming means that fruit harvest will arrive sooner, leading to a source of income sooner. An earlier bloom does not indicate more fruit bearing, it only adds risks. An example of an early bloom risk could be an increased risk for crop failure due to weather events such as flash freeze. However, Mr. Bartolotta makes a clear distinction that he believes that climate events are due to weather cycles rather than climate change. Could farmer denial of climate change be a major contributor to problems that come in the future should major projected climate changes occur?
Climate change indicators in the Hudson Valley, particularly changes in temperature and precipitation, have already had impacts on agricultural production and are projected to continue causing impacts throughout this century. To contextualize these changes, we will review Dutchess County's classification into the USDA's plant hardiness zones that indicate which crops will thrive when grown depending on the climate. These zones are measured by calculating the average annual minimum winter temperatures in a region and categorized into increments of 10 degrees Fahrenheit. As shown on the map, half of Dutchess is a 6A zone, with average winter minimum temperatures between -10 and -5 degrees Fahrenheit, and the other half a 5B zone, between -15 and -10 degrees Fahrenheit. This graph shows the minimum temperatures during the winter months in Dutchess County from 1895 to present. The trend of increasing minimum temperatures since about 1975 may indicate that agricultural lands in Dutchess are shifting to a higher plant hardiness zone, requiring crops and crop varieties adapted to a warmer climate to be grown. Not only are minimum winter temperatures rising, but average winter temperatures have also been increasing historically, as demonstrated by the graph which displays average winter temperatures in Dutchess County during the winter since 1895. This has direct impacts on apple production. Apples require a minimum number of chill hours, or time exposed to temperatures of 0 degrees to 7.2 degrees Celsius for successful blooming. These general trends indicate that chill hours are declining within Dutchess County, impacting some apple varieties' blooming success. Winter temperatures are currently projected to continue increasing in the Northeast. According to the RCP 8.5 scenario, mid-century winters are projected to be even milder, with fewer cold extremes, resulting in a less intense cold season and fewer frost days. This is decreasing the seasonality of the Northeast because winter temperatures are warming at a faster rate than other seasons. Changes in precipitation patterns in winter, such as later snowfall and earlier snowmelt, as well as greater rainfall, increases the amount of runoff during the season that contributes to erosion of certain farmlands. Warmer temperatures in late winter and early spring have already caused an earlier blooming season in fruit crops. This reduces the crop's tolerance to the cold, leaving them more vulnerable to spring cold snaps. Warming is also contributing to longer growing seasons for crops in the Northeast, indicated by projected increases in the freeze-free period, the length of time between the last freezing night in the spring and the first freezing night in the fall. The freeze-free period under the low scenario is expected to lengthen by approximately 2 weeks by mid-century and about 2 to 3 weeks under the higher scenario. By the end of the century, under the higher scenario, an increase of over 3 weeks is projected. Increases in rainfall intensity are projected in the winter and spring, having impacts as they can make fields overly saturated.
Typically, when planting an apple orchard of any size, it's for the long haul. A planted apple orchard is usually tended from sapling to commercial death for its produce, within a time range of 10 to 20 years. As a result, an incredible amount of diverse factors need to be considered before actually planting an orchard. You're with it for a while, and you can definitely tell when things are going wrong. As spoken about previously, a period of chilling or vernalization during the winter is required for apples to grow healthily. as the lower temperatures, typically between 0 to 7.2 centigrade, allow for the breakdown of hormones in buds that promote dormancy in the tree. This breakdown allows the buds to flower on time during the spring and have the ability to be harvested during the late summer months, although times may vary with each variety. On average, apple tree buds must meet a minimum number of chilling hours between 800 to 1200 hours, varying from type to type, during the winter before springtime is reached. If this requirement is not met, their bloom will occur later than normal, resulting in potential deficiencies and a longer blooming period, which requires around 300 hours of warm weather to prep. This longer and later blooming cycle can result in higher instances of disease and infection. Early warm spells or late cold spells can also play large factors in the growth of these buds. With a fluctuation of temperature, even a few days during a cycle that requires a lower temperature but a higher temperature ensues can leave an apple permanently damaged, either cosmetically with brown rings from sunburn or pale colors, or the apple spoiling. It should be noted with rising temperatures, drought could affect potential apple growth as well, with the temperature rising increasing the more north you go in the northern hemisphere. Rising temperatures can also contribute to things like new diseases and pests from entering the fray, causing problems in places that they have historically not had access to due to temperature and weather barriers. Along with newer spreading issues, the current pests that afflict apple trees, like maggot flies and codling moths, will have longer times during the season to reproduce, leading to more attacks by more generations that did not typically exist or have the time to procreate before. Although already existent, fire blight is a major disease across many different fruit-bearing trees, the symptoms being that of water engorgement, then depletion, leaving them shriveled and decayed. This disease is primarily transported by insects and pests, coupled with the damage done with the extra generations being produced by climate change. In general, every issue stated could have massive ramifications on the apple economy within the Hudson Valley, leading to annual harvest decreases.
Taking all this data into account brings us on to our next point, adaptation. How do we best protect our apples from climate change that is happening now as well as in the future? As with many things, education and awareness is a great starting point. Reaching out to the public to have a more informed community is always helpful as we look for adaptation strategies. Knowing this, framing is of the utmost importance. We want to ensure that we are able to reach out and connect with others as opposed to coming off as condescending and lecturing and end up pushing them away. After all, the apple farmers are the experts of their own crop, and we want to offer up data and information for them to make their own educated and informed decisions. When studying adaptation practices and speaking with local farmers, there are two key overarching ideas that I have noticed. The first is that in times of increased uncertainty, we must control what we can. What I mean by this is that with climate change, we will have an increase in variety of temperature, inclement weather, precipitation, and so on. These are all factors that are out of our control. To account for this, we have to be able to adapt and control what we can and what we do have power over. The second is that as the climate around us changes, so should our practices to match. Our climate is undoubtedly changing, and some practices that worked in the past may not be as effective in current time. We must adjust to the situations at hand. The picture shown on this slide is an example of one adaptation strategy called a drape net that I will go into further detail. Adaptations in practice. Two primary adaptation strategies currently in use are drape nets and wind machines. Drape nets are large, light, mesh nets that are typically measured in acres and draped over apple trees. This acts as a physical barrier to protect them from primarily hail, but also sun damage, birds, and other pests. Another adaptation strategy for an inconsistent climate have been wind machines, one of which is depicted on the slide here. This acts as a way to circulate down and mix warmer air in the inversion layer with cooler air that settles on the ground. This prevents frost damage as colder air can have tendencies of settling down in pockets or valleys in certain orchards.
With the resulting temperature changes and issues apples are facing, it is more than likely that revenue and profit generated from apple farming will decrease annually at a steady rate. Over time, it will become increasingly difficult to farm apples in the Hudson Valley. Because apples will become harder to farm, some apple farmers may choose to leave the area in pursuit of more fertile land. This in turn could cause the Hudson Valley to lose large tourist and cultural attractions.